Hello everyone, Shaurya here. So today I am going to start one of an important topic of ACCA APM, that is Advanced Performance Management, and that is value-based management, that is VBM. We all know that VBM, that is value-based management area, is one concept wherein the students faces the most difficulty in understanding it. And ACCA, we all know that is in APM exam, one or two questions there is always there on this area of value-based management. Hence, it will be not wrong to say that VBM plays a very important role in ACCA APM exam, and that too it has a very significant marks as well. So I in this video I will be explaining VBM in a very simple manner so that all those students who would be looking at it, they are able to understand what actually VBM is, and they are able to uh, f- uh, they are able to overcome their fear of value based of this area of value based management, and are able to perform and write good answers on this area. So we all know that, and whenever an organization produces their performance report, they basically provide profit based measures, that is the traditional performance measures such as return on capital employed, that is ROCE, or return on investment, that we can call it, earnings per share, EPS, or net profit margin, to measure their performance. And we can see that the ratios in form of these are being provided in the entity's performance report. However, the traditional performance measures are criticized for the fact that they only help in analyzing the historical performance of the organization, and that too they are only focusing on the short term performance, for example on annual basis, quarterly basis, etc. The for on what basis the entity's performance report is being prepared. But the stakeholders may be more interested in knowing about the future prospects of the organization. That is, how well or what are the goals of the organization, or what are the future prospects, what will the future revenue, or the other aspects that would actually help the entity in maintaining the value of their shareholders. And so in such cases, traditional performance measures, we all know, will not be able to play a very crucial role, and hence for that, value based management, that is VBM, comes to light. Because value based management, we can say that what actually value means, because we see that VBM, where V means value actually means shareholders value, and therefore we can all see the fact that value based management covers a good discussion on ROI, that is return on investment, RI, residual income, and most importantly economic value added, that is EVA. Therefore, value based management is a very important aspect for APM exam, and in if talk about in real world, then it also plays a very important role in analyzing the performance of the organization as well. So what actually VBM is? VBM is actually an approach wherein it follows a concept of discounted cash flow technique. And we all know discounted cash flow technique means wherein it looks to to investment in all those projects wherein the returns exceeds their cost of capital, so that the value for the shareholders can be created. Because we all know, when the if the NPV of the project is not able to provide appropriate returns, or is not coming out to be positive, or is coming out to be negative, then this means that the entity has not been able to create value for the shareholders, rather it has destroyed it. Therefore, VBM uses the discounted cash flow techniques in measuring the value of the organization. And that's why the idea being that the value is only created when the company generates returns which beat their cost of capital. So thereby, VBM is an approach to the management wherein the company's strategy is to align the activities of their all all levels of their management, whether it is strategic, tactical, or operational, so that the company's focus can be laid on the key drivers of shareholders' wealth, and hence the maximization of this value. So thereby VBM to measure performance in VBM, mostly economic value added, that is EVA, is being used. And we all know that EVA is also one of a very important topic that is being asked by the ACCA in almost every sittings of APM exam. And bec- here in VBM, economic value added is being used because it helps in identifying the value drivers. Now a question can arise, what actually are value drivers? We value drivers are basically those that helps in finding out or in driving the those value, those activities that would actually help in deriving the or in creating the value of the organization. Basically, those activities which are linked to the long-term shareholders value, and that which would help in influencing the and activities of the managers, that would cascade throughout all levels of the organization and across all divisions, that would link to the objectives for the managers and staff, and most importantly that would cover both financial and non-financial areas of the performance. We all know that traditional performance measures, that is, for example, ROCE, ROI, EPS, or any other, or gross profit margin, etc., they are basically criticized for the fact that they mainly focuses on the financial aspects of the organization, and that they are not paying that due attention to the non-financial areas. But VBM is that concept which has a mix of both financial and non-financial areas, and also it gives due importance to both internal and external factors. So thereby, the measures that are being used in VBM, though there are four measures that have been provided. First of all, the economic value added. Second, market value added, that is MVA. Third, net present value, and fourth, shareholder value analysis. But basically, the economic value added is the concept which is mostly asked if the question of VBM is being there in the ACCA APM exam. And we can see that here also it is being said that EVA is a primary measure that is being used while analyzing the or measuring the VBM. We can say that both EVA and NPV method have a same assessment way, because if a positive EVA or NPV means that the entity has been able to create value for its shareholders, while a negative one would mean that the entity has destroyed or has not been able to create value for its shareholders. So thereby, though the calculation of both EVA Though the calculation of both EVA and NPV are very much different, wherein the EVA is criticized for the fact that its calculation is much more complex than as compared to NPV. But still, the positive aspect of EVA is that its assessment and its linkage with NPV is very much similar. And so thereby EVA is often given much more importance than by the shareholders if they want to analyze whether the entity has been able to create value for them or not, which is the important aspect all the that VBM covers. So thereby, EVA is a primary measure that is being used in this VBM area. Second is market value added, that is MVA. This is the accumulated EVA generated by the organization since it was formed. But we can see that MVA also focuses on this EVA aspect only. And last is shareholder value analysis. This is the application of discounted cash flow technique to valuing the whole business rather than the single potential investment. We can understand from this sentence only that shareholder value analysis focuses on using the discounted cash flow techniques to value the whole business rather than focusing on any particular investment that the entity is looking to do. So thereby thereby I can say that if we talk about the VBM, and if a question arises on how a VBM can be analyzed, basically we have to focus on EVA code, EVA technique. And we can see that in exam kit questions area, whenever a question of VBM has been arised, one or two numerical of EV economic value added 2 has been provided. So thereby, EVA is a very important aspect that we have to also cover if we are looking to do our mastery over this VBM. So now a question could arise that VBM, if the entity is looking to implement VBM, because currently any entity, for example, assuming is using traditional performance measures, but now it is looking to shift from these traditional performance measures to this VBM area, because traditional performance measures focuses on the short-term aspects, whereas VBM focuses on the more long-term areas. So thereby it is true that changes in the organization's culture and in the techniques that the entity used to measure its performance would surely take place if it is looking to implement VBM. So thereby the implementation of VBM here involves 4 steps. Though it is not necessary to learn all 4 in that in word to word, I will provide you a brief explanation of how we can learn this area or this how implementation of VBM. We can all say that step one is strategy development. We can see that the entity, for example, is using traditional performance measures, for example, return on capital employed or net profit margin. But this does not mean that the entity, if able to meet their ROCE or net profit margin target, then they would be able to create value for the shareholders. But on the other hand, if economic value added, that is EVA, is being used by the organization, then if the entity is able to meet their targets of EVA, then this would surely mean that they would be able to create value for their shareholders. And for that only, a strategy for the maximizing shareholders' wealth measured using a single overall metric, and that is economic value added, is being laid. So thereby the step one is strategy development. Step two is performance targets related. Again, step two mainly focuses on using the performance targets. For example, EVA. In step one, we focused on or we said that the board of directors discussed that their aim is to maximize their shareholders' wealth. Now in step two, they are now focusing on the aspects that would help in achieving this goal. And for that, we can see that economic value added is given much importance. Because economic value added, though it is criticized that its calculation is more complex, it is difficult to understand, but it is also true that economic value added gives due importance to both short-term and long-term financial and non-financial aspects. And how that it is by that EVA capitalizes all those expenditure which it feels that would create value for the organization in the long term. And for that, and thereby it encourages the managers to undertake all such expenditures, because doing so would not only help the entity to create its value in the long term, but also of its shareholders' value as well. So thereby, in step two, we have the organization determines the different performance as targets all the measures that they would have to use. Step three is operational plans. Here, the task would be given to the specific employees. For example, to the divisional managers. The divisional managers would be given the target of maintaining the economic value added of their own divisions. And basically, uh, the targets are being divided to the different divisions, wherein the wherein all the managers are motivated to work on those areas that would actually help entity in achieving their primary objective of maximizing the shareholders' wealth. And that's why the goals or the activities to different operations or divisions are being distributed. And lastly, is performance measures. We all know that after the performance metrics and rewards are being created and everything has been done, thereafter a combination of short-term and long-term targets and financial and non-financial targets are being used to measure the fact that the performance measures or the targets that has been created in step two, whether they are actually helping in maximizing the shareholders' wealth, that is, whether they are actually helping in achieving the organization their goals or their primary objective. For that, staffs at all levels of the organization, whether it is strategic, tactical, operational, or the divisional, divisional structures, they all are motivated to achieve these new target sets. And for that, we can say that the changes in the reward systems, wherein such bonus schemes are being introduced, which encourages them to measure to which encourages them to achieve these new target sets uh, are being are being implemented, so that the activities of the staffs, whether no matter which staff they are, whether they are managers, employees, etc., are get aligned with the entity's primary objective of maximizing the shareholders' wealth. So we can see that how implementing VPM brings such a huge change in the culture of the organization, wherein the employees or the managers were which earlier were more focused on the traditional performance measures are now will but after the implementation of VPM will now get more focus on both long-term financial and non-financial measures. Not only that, a changes in the reward system too takes place. Thereafter, a VPM evaluation takes place, wherein we can say it is true that if we are that any concept or anything has both advantages and disadvantages as well, and VBM too has. So if a question arises that wherein we have to ask, wherein we are asked about how the evaluation of VBM, wherein a case study of any company is being given, and a question has been asked wherein the board of directors are asking us about the evaluation of VBM, then in such case the both we have to discuss both advantages and disadvantages, because whenever anything, if we see that an evaluation has been asked, then we have to cover both advantages and disadvantage of any aspect which has been asked in the question. So first of all, we all know the advantage of VBM is that it has a objective, or it has a focus of achieving the entity's primary objective of maximizing the shareholders' wealth. It is the primary advantage of VBM. And second, and if it is looking to achieve the maximization of the shareholders' wealth, then it is surely that VBM is long term and forward looking as well, because VBM because by using different performance measures, for example, EVA, the stakeholders or primarily the shareholders would be able to analyze the future prospects of the organization and whether the fact that the entity would be able to create value for them in the future or not. However, a disadvantage of VBM, as we discussed earlier, that VBM requires a cultural shift with new objectives, performance metrics, and reward schemes impacting employees at all levels. And we all know that the, that the staffs may be reluctant to change, and because they would be requiring training to overcome any unfamiliarity and to understand some of the complexities of VBM and mainly the economic value added, and which they are reluctant to do so. And if this happens, then implementation of the VBM will turn out to be fail in the long term. Second, it is also true that shareholders may need to be educated to understand this VBM technique. Though we are stating that VBM mainly focuses on the maximization of the shareholders' wealth, but on the other hand, it is also true that the shareholders may not be having an appropriate knowledge on this area, and for that, they too would have to be educated so that they are able to understand what VBM is and how implementation of VBM will prove to be beneficial for them only. So we can see that how what things we discussed above, that advantages and disadvantages, two advantages and two disadvantages we have already discussed above, and that too has covered in a more detailed manner in this area. Thirdly, we can say about the advantages, we can say the third advantage we discussed above, that we by using the traditional performance measures, the employees or the staffs or the managers would be more focused on achieving the short-term targets. But if VPN is being used, controllable targets would be created and would be assigned to the specific employees. Not only that, the targets that would be set would be such that would motivate the employees, all the managers, all the divisional staffs or managers to focus on the overall objective of the organization, or that is of maximizing of the shareholders' wealth. And hence, this would help the entity in reducing the dysfunctional behavior chances of wherein the managers are getting motivated to achieve the short-term targets. So this is a third advantage of VBM, wherein the focus of all employees in the organization are getting focused towards one area, and that is maximization of shareholders. However, we can, if talk about a disadvantage, we said that we discussed earlier that VBM focuses on identifying the value drivers. That means all those activities which are linked to long-term shareholders' value. However, it is also true that identifying these value drivers can prove to be very difficult. For example, in calculation of EVA, it would be difficult for the board to determine whether, for example, marketing expenditure done, whether this expenditure would actually help the entity in improving their brand value in the long term or not, and hence a confusion whether, and hence a confusion on the fact that this marketing expenditure done should be capitalized or not would take place. So therefore, identifying these value drivers becomes very difficult. So thereby, how easily we will be able to discuss the three advantages and disadvantage of VBM simply by our discussion that we done above. So thereby, lastly, we can talk about that since we as discussed that since EVA and net present value are the two key measures that are being used for the VBM, and we also discussed about the advantages and disadvantages of here of of both this EVA and VBM. So therefore, it is very important to understand the overall concept of VBM. And for that, I will encourage you all that you must practice a question, that is question 59, that is Basel, which has been asked in March or June attempt of 2018. This exam kit question, and because this question has a very detailed answer, or it has covered that VBM concept very beautifully, wherein both the VBM concept and the numerical as well of economic value added has been discussed. So thereby, wherein we can see that in this Basel question, both the appropriateness and even the changes that would take place by the implementation of VBM has been discussed. And secondly, the numerical of EV, and that too, both these questions together have been asked in the section B of 25 marks. So we can already see that we have already discussed the advantages and disadvantages, that is their appropriateness, and how the implementation of VBM will bring changes in the organization too. But for a more well detailed and we can say that a sentence or the answer writing practice, I would say that the question 59, that is Basel of exam kit, you should practice that so that you would be able to get a good analysis and good well detailed answer writing technique as well over this VBM concept, and you would be able to analyze how the EVA calculation has been done. So this is the value based management concept that I covered here, and I would discuss further more important topics of APM in my upcoming videos. But value based management is one concept that you should thoroughly have a good hand on, because it is one question that is surely asked mainly in section 2. So that's it for now. Bye.